I think there's a lot of information out there that can suggest to people the reasons why this decision was made. What I'm saying is that there were multiple factors. The events of Sunday certainly played into it, and I think we've discussed some of the gaps and lapses that happened. And again, my decision here is based on what I believe is going to be best for this department and for the city moving forward.
So you about your process and how you're going to be working with the mayor here. It sounds like there's some concerns that.
Yes, I think the biggest thing is, first, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Chief Barnes and I are friends. We will remain friends. I had the opportunity to come over with him from Wisconsin to our work that we did together. And then also my friend and colleague, Yvonne Underwood, but we've known for several years, had a role with me coming in here. I think this morning when I had a meeting with the mayor, some of the things that we're going to do as a police department is to be very proactive. If you look at some of my statistics from when I was in Beloit, Wisconsin, we were a very proactive police department, identifying the individuals that are causing the gun violence and the gang problems in that city. And we're going to identify them here in Seattle, and we're going to put an effort, a concerted effort, into identifying those individuals, making the appropriate arrests, and sending them over to King County Prosecutor's Office.
Now, that's some Seattle officials Friday after talking about communication breakdowns that left the public waiting for hours for information on a food festival shooting that left 3 dead the prior weekend, and how that was part of the variety of reasons that they had asked the former police chief, Sean Barnes, to resign. The Center Square Washington team has been on top of this story from the beginning, and to discuss that communication breakdown further, let's talk to the Center Square investigative reporter, TJ Martinell. TJ, the mayor there said that the breakdowns that occurred the weekend before last were unacceptable after the shooting at the Bite of Seattle Festival at the Seattle Center. What did you find out in text messages that seemed to really show that communication breakdown?
Yeah, so what happened is, as you know, the press conference was delayed by several hours, and there was disputes over who and what exactly was causing the delay. And attending the press conference along with the mayor was Governor Bob Ferguson, and rumors started to circulate, and there was accusations thrown around that he was the one who had it delayed so that he could be there for a photo op, even though he really didn't say a whole lot. So I filed a public records request the next day with his office to figure out what kind of communication he had with Katie Wilson. And within 2 days, I got text messages from the governor from that night where he's telling Katie Wilson he could be there at 9. The press conference didn't start until 10:45 p.m. And what it's really showing is, because she told him, we're likely to have a press conference, which raises a lot of questions of the possibility that they wouldn't have even had one on top of it being delayed. So what the text messages indicate is that the governor was not the cause of the delay. And so that just raises additional questions that we're pursuing, which is, why was it delayed? Was it because of a lack of information? Was it because they found out information about the suspects that they didn't want released to the public or weren't sure? Was it because somebody told them, don't do anything until I get there? As you probably know, the police chief wasn't even in Seattle at the time. He wasn't even in Washington State. He was in Dallas for some convention. The former police chief doesn't even live in the state. He lives in Chicago. So there's all these things that are being brought to light. But these text messages just show a breakdown in communication between different elected officials.
Now, Wilson has said that, she thought that they had the information going out, but later found that that wasn't the case. And if we just look at the timeline here of when these official statements were being made, of course, social media posting at 6:30. Yeah, a lot of people can see that. And announcing that there was a mass casualty event, but they didn't have a news conference until 11 p.m. That's 5 hours almost of not really having much more information than what was posted on a social media post, let alone having the ability to answer any questions that members of the public and the press may have.
Yeah, and I think that there's two things to keep in mind. Is there's a difference between a media press availability press conference and a police briefing, where the police could have come out on their own and provided details about the shooting. Most importantly, there was an active suspect on the loose that they had not apprehended. I don't think they've even been caught now. So you had a suspect on the loose, and people had no information in order to identify them and report them to the police. And so that's the biggest question, is why was the police not allowed to brief the public on information that they might have needed to know? Because this person, for all we know, this person has gone out and killed someone else. We don't know, because there's the information hasn't, been made available. So that's the issue that's going on, is there was this complete breakdown in communication with the public, between public officials, elected officials, and it just shows that there's not many people are seeing this as a failure in leadership on a lot of levels, which is why we're seeing this fallout. And the fact that I got these text messages from the governor's office within 2 days, that's the fastest public records request response I've ever received. I got the text messages before I even got the acknowledgement letter.
Well, especially for text messages. I mean, and the images that you got from the governor's office weren't like a screenshot where you hit the buttons on your phone. They took a picture of the phone. To get you that statement. In a way, I mean, do you think that they moved quick to just be clear what happened here with the timeline?
I think that this is the governor sending a very clear message that this press conference was not delayed because of him, because he had previously told other media outlets that he gave a timeline to them that matches up with his text messages. So I think the governor is smart in the sense that he knows that this is a PR nightmare, and he's not the one who's going to fall. It kind of reminds me of the Maltese Falcon, the very end, for anybody who's seen it, where they're all getting together and trying to figure out who the fall guy is going to be. And clearly the governor's like, that's not going to be me. So far it's been the former Chief Barnes, but we'll see how this is going to be a political fallout potentially for Katie Wilson, because it's also reflected on her. And this is, with all the press conferences she did recently, trying to put out these fires, but it just remains to be seen what's going to happen. But getting these text messages so quickly shows that we have an inside view of what kind of communication was going on with elected officials, but we also are getting an idea of who was and wasn't responsible for the delay. So that's something that we're obviously going to be continuing to pursue until we figure out what happened.
Well, and just an assessment as well of, listen, I mean, mass shooting takes place. You want to get as much information out there as possible. Seems to have been some more sentiments put towards, who all can we get to line up with us at this news conference for whatever kind of, press splash there may be, instead of just getting out there, like you said, with a police briefing with details about the suspect and where it's safe, where it's not safe, unanswered questions, and so forth. But to the former police chief, Sean Barnes here, you said he doesn't even live in the state. He lives in Chicago.
Neither does our intern police chief, who's a friend of his. He also lives in Illinois. Their primary residence. They have apartments or whatever. They have places where they live when they're in Seattle, but they are in the area. But that just raises another question of the mayor for Seattle has to live in Seattle. It's the whole concept of them being the mayor, is they're representing the city they live in. So this really raises another question, is should the police chief have to live in the city? And should they, because it becomes an out of sight, out of mind issue because they don't live there. So if things go wrong, it's not their direct problem. And I think a lot of people were shocked to discover that. It's like, wait a minute, he doesn't even live in the same time zone. I mean, what happens when something like this occurs?
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. He wasn't even there when this happened, so he couldn't necessarily oversee the response there on the ground. I'm sure he was on the phone quite a bit, but pretty remarkable that he doesn't even live in the state of Washington, let alone the city of Seattle. And was still making six figures plus. What was his salary?
He was making over $300,000 a year, and it's just been revealed that he got a severance package of over $700,000. So, I mean, we're going to be finding out how much time he spent out of the state during his tenure as police chief. We're going to find out how often this current interim chief has been out of the state as well, because this even from putting the practicality aside, it's just a bad look. It's a bad look to have something like this happen and then finding out that the chief doesn't even live here. It wouldn't maybe change anything if he did live here, but he happened to be in Dallas for that convention. But it just looks bad. It gives off this impression of, oh, not my problem when I'm not there.
Well, and Katie Wilson, the Seattle mayor, this seems to be a real test to her capabilities, right? I mean, she's new to the office.
She's new to pretty much everything. For people who don't know, she has no prior political experience. She's never been the mayor of even like a tiny town in some rural part of Washington. She's never held elected office before. She wasn't even, we know this for a fact, she wasn't even paying her own bills. Her dad was financially supporting her, and she's 40 years old and married. So one of the questions that has to be asked is why would anybody think that she would be able to respond well to something like this? What prior experience did she have where people looked at that and said, okay, that's the sign of somebody who's capable of leadership during a crisis? And it also raises an additional questions. What happens when there's something that's even worse that happens? What if we have some sort of terrorist attack in Seattle, like something not on, God forbid, something on par with 9/11, but where you have to make drastic decisions very quickly. You have to be able to coordinate with people, and you have to communicate with the public and with other elected officials.
And you have to also consider, does your police chief live in the state, or is he going to be more concerned about what his family, half the country away is dealing with? Well, TJ, I know you and the team from Washington State are going to be on top of this and continuing pushing out stories, updating us about that. So people need to get the latest at thecentersquare.com.